All right, so let me just talk about command injection here. This is the simplest case of command injection on where you have a Linux command line, and the issue is you've got a form that you're supposed to be able to use to test your internet connection, something you'd probably see on one of the configuration pages in your router. So you can put in an IP address, and on my system, the only IP address you can use is 127.0.0.1. So this will send pings, and you get 2 replies showing 64 bytes from. And if you recognize this, then if you recognize this, this is just the command line ping. And that indicates that this code is probably very sloppily written, and this is in fact the code that's written. It takes data from the user and just calculates a line of command line code by doing ping minus C2 and then adding the data from the user, and then runs that with the system command. And this is considered a very poor, dangerous programming practice because the data that came from the user is executed at the command line, and that suggests that you could have command injection. So if you do a semicolon ls here, it will execute the ping, and then it will execute an ls. So you have command injection. This means I can put something in that was supposed to be data, but it's misinterpreted by the server as a command. So now you can ask, who am I? What privileges do I have on that server? You can do who am I. You can execute any Linux command you want, separated by semicolons here. And I am www.data, which is the Apache user, so I don't have administrator privileges on the server yet, although there are privilege escalation exploits, and you can track them down if you do a uname -a to find out what version of Linux is on here, what in particular which kernel it's using. I think you'll find this server is in fact badly out of date, like a lot of my servers are. It's running 32-bit Linux, and it's really quite old. So in fact there are some well-known privilege escalation exploits to escalate up to root, so you can take over the server to a large extent. Anyway, in this case there's just some flags to find, and if you use these commands like ls and grep and cat and find, you can search the server for files and find some flags on the server. So that's one case of command injection. This is the simplest case where you just put the commands right in here. And this happens a lot. And here's a famous case about 10, maybe 10 years ago. This was one of the first big Linux vulnerabilities. There used to be a belief 20 years ago that Linux was much more secure than Windows. And that was arguable because the early versions of Windows and Windows web servers were spectacularly insecure, with just ridiculous flaws, and Linux was better. But then about 8 or 10 years ago, there were several really headline-grabbing security flaws appeared in Linux, and people had to realize that it really is up to the skill of the developer, the system administrator. Either system is dangerous if it's not configured properly, and Linux can be quite vulnerable too. So here is an image processor. So let me get an image to work with. I'll just take one of these. I open one of these. Here's some image from the government. So I save this image someplace. Put it on my desktop. All right, that's dhsh.jpg. All right, so if you have an image and you want to process that image on a server, ImageMagick is the library generally used on Linux servers, and I just found some open source code to do it. So I can take that image, upload it to the server, and it will process it with this command: convert to a thumbnail that file and put the thumbnail, the original, somewhere. So this does some kind of thumbnail processing. It makes a thumbnail of a fixed size, and when you click the thumbnail, it takes you to the original size image. So this is the sort of thing you'll find in a profile page on a social network or anything else that uses images. And this had a very serious vulnerability. For some reason, the people who wrote ImageMagick the library that processes this, were not content to just process image files. They decided to let you modify the image files so you could add some text to the image. And in particular, you could specify a fill command which would load the color from a website. And they implemented it by letting you put in a parameter, which was the URL, and then they implemented that by creating the command line, like I did above with ping, where it would curl that URL. So data that came from the user was included in a command that was executed as a system command, and that means you have command injection vulnerability. So if you put this text in a text file, all right, let me get a text editor here. By the way, I actually paid for a text editor on the Mac called Smultron because they don't give you Notepad or anything like it that can make a plain text file. They give you, it keeps on making weird files like formatting like RTFs. So this is a plain text editor. So I save this. And all right, on my desktop, I'm going to call that exploit.jpg. Make it look like an image. It has an image file extension, but it is just a text file. And now I upload that. Desktop exploit.jpg. There we go. And upload it. And now notice it prints hello and the date. So let's take a look at that file we set up. And here's the point. Here it is, echo hello, semicolon date. So after you put in the right punctuation marks and content before it, some of this data is misinterpreted as a command by the server. So now you can execute arbitrary commands on the server. I could do an ls and say, who am I? So I save this and then upload it again. Now I get a list of files and then the identity of me, www.data again. So there are various files here, and you can look in those files, and again you'll find some flags hidden in those files. And there's another one of these to try for command injection, which is Drupal. Now this one tends to get destroyed a lot. Let's see if my server is up or if I'm going to have to regenerate it. Well that's just news. That's not the vulnerable website. That's here. Okay. Okay, Drupal is an open source content management system competing with WordPress, and the username and password are student1. I put that static password on there to stop automated attacks. It looks like my server is still up, so let's see if this attack still works, because it does tend to get trashed a lot. The point Drupal had some very serious SQL injection vulnerabilities. One called Drupalgeddon, another one called Drupalgeddon 2, and Drupalgeddon 3. Versions of it over and over again had game-ending remote code execution vulnerabilities. So if you have a system with Python on it, and my Mac does, Macs do by default, most Linux systems do by default, and you can add it to Windows. You could also use Google Colab. In fact, let me try doing this in Google Colab. That's probably the best. Some people there have Windows machines, and Google Colab's the easiest way. Let's see. There's Colab. I haven't done any Google Colab, but I'm pretty sure it will work. So I make a new notebook, and all right, there is a script to run here. This is all the script I need. So I'll copy this. I think I can just run this in Google Colab. If I paste this in, now the way this works, this is going to import the requests library, which it uses to send web requests. And it's going to exploit my server, but when it does it, it's going to write a file. And one restriction here is you're writing a file and you cannot modify that file after you change it, after you write it once. So you have to add a new file every time. So when you see this yourname.txt, you have to customize this every time. So I'm going to call this samdemo1. And I'm going to, you have to put that in 3 places, there, and there, and there. There. So if this exploit works, it will create a file with that name on my Drupal server. So let's run it. And it looks like, okay, it says it worked. Let's try opening it here. This is what you want to see, a smiley face. That's what this exploit does. It puts a smiley face there. So good, you can run it right in Google Colab. This is great. It bypasses people having to install Python. So I'm going to now try some different commands. You see, here's the commands: echo, smiley face, pipe T, samdemo. You can't use the greater than sign. This is very common. When you're doing injection, there are certain characters that are blocked for various reasons in the code, so you have to use workarounds. So here it's trying to redirect the output to a file, and it uses pipe T instead of greater than. So now I'm going to do an ls minus L instead of this, and put that in samdemo2, and change the name of the file in 3 places. And I should be able to get a list of files on the server. Let's try that. All right, check samdemo2. And there it is, a list of files on the server. So you can execute file names, commands on the server in this manner. And there are again some flags defined here. So that's the Linux-based command injection, showing various versions of it. And this is one of the top 10 web vulnerabilities you'll find from OWASP. It just keeps coming around and around.